Hello everyone, welcome to my presentation. I am Mitchell Brewer, and this is live on our production Tableau server environment. So if we have an issue and I have to switch to Tableau desktop or something, you know why. I'm doing a live demo over VPN on Tableau Wi-Fi. So our presentation, Cargill, leading with value, delivering with speed, changing culture. Again, my name is Mitchell, and I'm one of two self-service analytics leads at Cargill. David in the front row here is the other one. And the presentation I'm giving is actually from my previous job. So I started out at Cargill as a data analyst. So I was doing this exact work that I'm going to present to you today. And what we discovered through the journey, and I'll hit on this more and more, is that by self-serving these analytics, we noticed that if I can find this kind of value with limited experience, then we can empower other people to find tremendous value as well. And that's how we actually started the self-service analytics team, and now we get to do that full time, is just empower other people to find value using platforms like Tableau. So I'm going to take a second and just play a quick video that explains Cargill in 2 minutes better than I ever could, and then I'll get started. Cool. So the takeaway there is that we're a massive privately owned company, right? We deal in a lot of industries and a lot of markets. And so this journey that I'm telling you here is focused heavily around working capital and supply chain analytics. But what we discovered throughout it was that it was a lot easier for me to teach other people how to do Tableau, for example, than it is for them to teach me supply chain or working capital or accounting for our 70 different businesses across dozens of countries. So now that you know a little bit about Cargill, I have a special request for you guys. Here's my Twitter handle. So I have a work mom back at Cargill, and she's very proud of me, but she couldn't be here today. So I'm hoping you guys can take out your phone for a minute, and I'll do like a very insightful pose, like I'm delivering great value to you. And then can you just take a photo of me and tweet it at me for my work mom and say something like, "Diane, you should be so proud." So I'll just pose here like majestic. Thank you. All right. And feel free, I love feedback as well, so feel free to deliver commentary on what you like, what you don't like about my presentation. If you have any questions, Twitter, LinkedIn, you can email me. So Tableau at Cargill, I want to give you a little background. So I've been using Tableau about 2.5 years now. I self-taught on Google and YouTube. And David really started it probably 5 or 6 years ago. And now we're up to about 500 desktop users and about 5,000 server users. And that has grown exponentially from last year when maybe we were half of that. So we're growing very, very fast. Incredible adoption of Tableau. It's across, again, I mentioned all those geographies. So again, we're a very global company. We're finding it in every function and business. So we're seeing it in our animal protein business, and we're seeing it in our HR, supply chain, all across Cargill. They're using Tableau. So the team that I was a part of when I wrote this presentation 6 months ago was called the Value Center of Expertise, which is a very ambiguous name, and we know that. But the bottom line of the Value Center of Expertise is it was a team of Lean Six Sigma consultants, so these process improvement experts. They'd travel to our manufacturing facilities where we process grain or whatever we do there, and they'd look for opportunities to improve. So they'd say, hey, you have a dusty pile of inventory. Like, do you need all that inventory? What's it for? Who's it for? And they'd have all these questions, and they'd come up with all these recommendations, like reduce your inventory. But at the bottom line, we needed data to support that. So we have these expert Lean Six Sigma consultants. One big component of that is data, but they didn't necessarily have the skills or experience to interact with like our ERP systems and do reporting or analytics on top of that information. And so we really came along as a new analytics function and an already new team. So the team was maybe 2 years old, and then the analytics function came in maybe a year after that. And what's really I want to point out about this slide is we didn't start with requirements. So we didn't have anyone in the team tell us what they wanted. We didn't have our businesses tell us what they needed. What we started with is looking for themes. So we stood around the coffee maker or the water cooler or whatever you want to call it, and we listened for people to have some pain and complain. And what we heard is that a lot of people were stressed out about their inventory. They don't know how much they have, they don't know where it is. I mean, pretty basic questions, but they needed some insight into how they were managing that and how they can manage it better and reduce our working capital that we require. So we started to build this framework, and I do have some live demos, by the way, so if you're getting bored with my slides, don't worry, I'm about to jump into some live demos. But this was our first attempt at what we call a value driver framework. And again, this is not a revolutionary concept. You can Google value driver frameworks for pretty much every analytical space. But the concept was we wanted to start taking things that we were measuring, like your days inventory outstanding, for example, which is a high-level balance sheet metric that pretty much everyone measures, but it wasn't driving action. It's very high level. It was measured monthly, and it was measured by business and plant if you're lucky. And that's also a lagging indicator. So you see it after you've already done whatever you've done, and you have no opportunity to improve from that information. And Cargill is full of analytics like that. And so we wanted to take that and say, if you wanted to change what you're seeing on the back end on this lagging indicator, you need to focus on these things on the right side. And I know it's a little small. I can actually probably zoom in a little bit. Perks of the browser, all right. And I have a better example in a minute. So really, what did we end up creating? This number is actually wrong. So we built 50 dashboards iteratively. So we had 4 team members, we did 2-week sprints, and we built 50 dashboards. You only see 28 because we failed a lot. And I think that's a key call out, is that failure is like a critical part of the process. And we only spent 2 weeks. So if I was wrong, if I had an hypothesis, like I would go out and Google stuff, like what's important in supply chain? And then it would say like these 5 things. So I'd go measure one of those things and build analytics around it, show it to our business, and then they'd be like, nah, we've already done that, or no, it doesn't add value, or no, it's actually not relevant to our business model. And then guess what? We lost 2 weeks of one person's time. That's a pretty small investment. So we learned a lot from that, and then we got better as we went, and we were able to build out 28 of these in about 6 months, or 50 of them in 6 months, 28 of which were successful. And then from there, we kept iterating, and they still are iterating on how to make these better and better. And so that's to the next point. We built a beta community. So raise your hand if you've heard in IT, like if I'm wrong, or actually just in general, if I'm wrong in my analytics, like I'm going to lose trust with the users. Like, have you heard that before? Yeah, I see some hands. So we had that same fear. Like, if we're wrong, we're going to lose trust. And what we found was by working side by side with them and with quick iterative turnarounds, I was really wrong a lot. Like, probably $150 million or more, I've been wrong on pieces of analysis, and with like accountants. And they're like not super friendly about when you're super wrong by massive millions of amounts of dollars. So, and I apologize if there's any accountants in the room, and I'm generalizing. But the point is, by me being able to go and identify that, oh, I missed this zero in my calculation or something, and go back and fix it and then republish it within a day turnaround or 2 days turnaround, they built the trust in the relationship and the process, even if they knew they needed to they needed to really cross-check me and make sure that the data was valid. And they became a partner in that, because again, I had no experience in the business. I had no experience with necessarily supply chain. But this process where we worked together iteratively allowed us to really improve upon that. So the beta community is actually on a social media site we call Yammer, it's not called, it's called Yammer, Microsoft product. But that actually allows us to go through and interact with them like forum style. And it's pretty amazing to see that a lot of times people have the same question. Where did this data come from, or what does this field mean? And so some of that you'll see we built into the analytics themselves, but it also allows us to see common needs. So we have one business person that says, I want this dimension or this level of detail. And then the other businesses may agree or disagree. And we have that conversation publicly on social media so that we don't have to field those requests via email and try to figure out if what they want is right or wrong or what's best interest in the analytics. And that leads us to getting skills analysis across multiple businesses. So you saw in the video, right, we have like financial, we have supply chain, we have agriculture, we have energy, we have tons of different types of businesses, and even within agriculture, there's tons of different types of businesses. And that means that the analytical needs are very different. So like for inventory, for example, like fresh chicken expires very fast, where something frozen or like a bag of starch that we may also sell expires very slowly. So they may care about very different measurements of inventory expiration. And I'll give an example of that in a little bit. But by building in parameters, which is a cool Tableau feature I'll show off, parameterizing everything, essentially. Every time we made an assumption about the data, like 2 days is reasonable, we built in a parameter as opposed to hard coding it. And that allowed us to remain flexible for probably 15 or 20 different business audiences to consume the same analytics. Now, to combat the fact that we had 20 businesses and tons of data because of 20 businesses, we also built guided analytics, which I'll show you in a minute. And that really helps the user focus on what they care about instead of just trying to show them everything at once for every possible audience in Cargill, because that would be impossible. So here's the first live dashboard you'll get to see. I showed you the value driver framework earlier. We've expanded and adjusted it. So this is the new value driver framework, and this is what we use today. Think of this as our table of contents or our landing page. This is where we send people when you're curious what we have. So you can mouse over any of these metrics and read about what the metric is. You can read when the data was refreshed last, and you can click it and it'll actually hyperlink directly to that piece of analysis. We're working on making things, and this probably is not a new concept for Tableau people in the room, but we're trying to make them fun, intuitive, visual, simple. So you'll try to see that we try to include that in every dashboard. It doesn't have to be technical names. It doesn't have to be complicated. Just keep it simple. This is our landing page. Yep. Well, not in Tableau. It's our landing page when we say to people, you want to see what working capital metrics we have? We give them this link. So instead of sending them to our Tableau server site where they have to navigate all the projects and workbooks, they just go here. So we were successful, and I'll talk about the outcomes in a minute, but why were we successful? Well, we had some really smart business people. So we had the Lean Six Sigma experts. I mean, they have decades of knowledge. Oftentimes they came from the business, so they really got how the business operated. And then we had our brand new analytics team, which had the tools, the technology to help build that out. Then we were empowered and humble. So I mentioned we did this over 6 months and we failed a lot. We only were able to do that because Diane, my work mom, was able to empower us to take those risks. So risks are important, and empowering your employees to take those risks are important, because we had to learn what makes sense and what works and what doesn't work. And then fail fast. So this is an example of a 2-week project I did. I call it the working capital iceberg. It didn't go over so well, a little too silly, a little difficult to use, unintuitive. But this was an example of something that I spent 2 weeks on, trying to make it fun, simple, effective, and it failed. It wasn't well received. But that's okay, because again, it was just 2 weeks, and I learned from it. I learned a better way to deliver the same value. But you can still deliver business value and have it be fun and interactive, so don't be afraid of that. We talk about actionable granularity, which again, I'll just show you a demo of that when I get to the dashboard demos. And then I'd already talked about parameters and filters, so I'll just keep moving. So our team stood up, instead of like a charter or a philosophy or creed, we just have these tenets. And so these were the things that we needed to, like, every time something felt a little wrong or someone asked us for something and we weren't sure if it was in the best interest of the product that we were building, we went back to these and we said, are we following these behaviors? And so one great example of that is people would tell us, like, oh, you did it for this one ERP instance. Like, can you do it for these 5 others? That would, that's what I need. And we needed to say, like, well, we're leading with value. And that was in my presentation title, right? Like, how much value will this provide? And does it provide more value than the way we're doing it today? Are we recognizing other ideas? Or are we being stubborn and prideful, that we think our way is best? And we had to stop and ask ourselves these questions quite often. And sometimes we were right and sometimes we were wrong. So outcomes, the good stuff. So I had called this slide like secret sauce, I think, at one point, but Cargill actually makes secret sauce. So I was told I can't use the word secret sauce on any of my slides. I also can't tell you dollar amounts, so I'm just going to have to it for you. So we found several in opportunity. There's some big and some little We captured many in value. We stood up a project to operationalize these analytics. So again, these were all built in 2-week iterations, so they weren't operational. They were just like, finger in the wind or whatever they call it, trying out and seeing if it makes sense, if it works. So now that everyone loved it, they came back and they said, great, like, I want it next month, and I want it faster, and I want it better, and I want it enhanced. And so we stood up a pretty massive project to build all these out. But the beauty of it is that we proved all the value up front, and so everyone was just like throwing money at us to figure it out, as opposed to trying to say, like, if you just give me some money, I can make you something production ready and awesome. We did it the other way, which some people say is backwards, but I think it worked really well. We found really unexpected insights. So I mentioned we built guided analytics, but oftentimes we didn't even know like what the value was. And I have a phenomenal example of this coming up, but like data quality insights especially, like we had a filter that removed, you have like a, what do they call it? Pound symbol for unassigned values. And so in the filter, there was a pound symbol, and I thought, like, what if I remove that filter? And so I removed the pound symbol, and then all of a sudden, all the data disappeared. And what that told us is that those materials didn't have a material type assigned, for example. And so when all the data disappears when you removed unassigned material type, and so like people were saying, I don't know how much inventory I have, or I can't manage my inventory. And it's because like they don't even have a material type assigned. Like they don't even know what materials they have. They don't have the metadata or master data about their materials. And so we found like incredible insights in like completely unexpected places, like a filter. Like you would never think to look to a filter to discover something about your data. You think you look at the graph or the bar chart or whatever it is. But we found tons of those types of insights. And then cultural phenomenon. So again, we have a lot of people that maybe were spreadsheet warriors or had never dealt with analytics before, and definitely hadn't done them this fast. So they're used to the maybe traditional waterfall method or whatever we want to call it, where they'd like open a project, it'd be $300,000, it'd take 6 months, they work with the business analysts, they gather a bunch of requirements, right? And then they go off and some developer builds that stuff and they come back and they, like even best case scenario, they answer the question, then guess what, you have another question. Or guess what, 6 months have gone by and your question has changed, or your data's changed, your market's changed, your process has changed, or that person's no longer with the company, right? So we have this cultural phenomenon where people are getting curious themselves. They're getting analytical, they're asking their own questions, and they're empowered to do so. And that's exactly what we try to empower and teach in self-service analytics. And again, when I was doing this, like I self-taught Tableau on Google, right, on YouTube. And I realized like if I can do this with no subject matter expertise in the business, in the domain of supply chain, and in the tool itself that I'm even using, like, and I'm finding several of opportunity, right? Like every rock we turn over, there's a big opportunity. We just need more people turning over rocks. So that was a huge outcome too. So demonstration, you could stop listening to my boring slides and start seeing some cool live stuff. So this is on time and full. It's actually a relatively simple metric. It's measuring, are we delivering everything we said we would, when we said we would. So this was a 2-week iteration. So it's not as polished or as beautiful as some of the stuff we built today. There's definitely a better version in production now. But I want to show you what it looks like, what 2 weeks of work looked like for us. And typically that first week was all just getting the data and sorting it out and cleaning it and getting it ready to visualize. So the second week, this is really 1 week of dashboarding that built this. And so you'll notice some of the philosophies I stated, right? Simple, fun, actionable. So simple and fun, like a clock for on time, people got that. They didn't need to like read a data definition to understand like this is measuring when stuff arrives. How often does it arrive on time? The truck being full, like people love that truck. It's like, it is a conversation topic. It's like, you remember that truck dashboard? That thing's awesome. And then the overall on time and full on the right. We used custom worksheets to build in tooltip information buttons, so you've probably seen this in some of your sessions. This allows us to explain the definition of the metrics, some context, the calculation, where the data came from, when it was refreshed, build in some of that context without having to have it clutter the dashboard. We have, again, parameters and filters, not a ton of them, but we have, like, you could select your business. And then down here, I want to show you that, is that big enough? I can zoom in a little bit. So we built it in English. Like, this isn't business unit or business function or what type of on time do you want? Like, we just put it in English, right? I'd like to view what by what. So we try to make the dashboards conversational. Like, if you were having a conversation with your data, what would it feel like? So you can select, maybe I'm seeing the high-level business. So this is for maybe fantastic for a business unit leader, because they maybe want to compare, how is my business doing to other businesses? Which actually, I'm going to derail for a second and tell you a cool insight out of that even, was people told us, they always said, what audience is this for? Like, your analytics, like, who's this for? And like, we had difficulty answering that question, because guess what? Right now, it's for a business unit leader. If I go and change this to plants, it's now for a plant manager, maybe. Live demo, we'll see. So you will be able to see the plant view. And that's now to compare how your plant's doing against other plants. And then you could drill into your plant and see how your plant's customers are doing. And whether they're receiving their goods on time and full. And that could be used for like a customer service manager. Are my customers getting what they want when they wanted it? It could be used for transportation and logistics to say, like, are we having a problem delivering in a specific geography? So there's tons of different audiences. And we try to always, again, drill down to that actionable granularity. So you can, when I mouse over, we provide, again, context. So for this particular plant, they have 19% on time and full. What's really interesting about that tooltip, and it's probably hard to see, is the on time is 19%, the in full is 99%. That's already an insight right there. Like, why are we never delivering on time, but we're always delivering in full? And is that intentional, or like, do we have someone like in the back room that's just like not updating the delivery dates or something, or like what's going on? Like, we don't, and we can go drill into that record. And with the Tableau View Data feature, I could even click on that record and view the underlying transactions that led us to get to that percentage, down to specific document numbers. Ancient expired, this is another good example. So this is, again, I think hopefully pretty intuitive. This is how much of our inventory is expired that we're still paying to store, because that's a waste of money. Why are we storing expired inventory? That costs warehouse space, right? And more importantly, back to actionable granularity, like, I want to get rid of the expired stuff, but I'd also like to catch things before they expire and maybe sell them for money as opposed to throwing them away, and so that we don't ever have expired inventory. So not only solve the current pain, but also solve that future pain, right? So we have, you'll now see our buttons have matured a little bit, so we have the kind of same information in the information button. We now have a known issues and enhancements button, so when people interact on that social media community, we start putting their stuff out here. So, hey, this doesn't work, or this doesn't feel right. So we put it out here so that people can go and, like, if something doesn't look right, they check here first, and they see, oh yeah, we know about that already. Or, hey, someone's already asked for that same feature, let me go upvote it on the forums. Which leads us to the third button. The mail is not actually email, it's to our Yammer community. So we found something interesting with this particular piece of analysis is that every single facility had a different warehouse cost per square foot. And so the business said, can you include all those different warehouse costs per square foot? And we said, yeah, where do you store that? And they're like, well, Bob has it on his spreadsheet, and Nancy has it in her spreadsheet. And so we were like, in 2 weeks? No. So we just built a parameter, and each business, depending on what facility they're looking at, can apply their own warehouse cost per square foot. So again, using parameters to keep it flexible. I can go and look at expired inventory, so I can click this big red X. I think it was originally a skull and crossbones, right? But that was a little too morbid, so we made it pretty generic. And it's not like skull and crossbones, like, well, it could have been expired meat, I suppose. Anyway, I digress. So you can see when it expired and how many batches expired. So we had 1 or 2 batches, even back from 2014. By the way, disclaimer, this is all anonymized data, so you're not going to get any real insights out of this. But the point is that we have a batch from like 2014. Like, why have we been storing that for years? And is that like, sometimes it's a broken bag sitting on a pallet in like the back room. And like, we're paying for an entire pallet to store 1 broken bag. And that's square footage that we're paying for. So we can go back and identify these, and then I can click on that batch and understand very specifically which plant it is, which batch it is, down to the material code, and then I can go call someone, or if I'm the facility manager, I can go find that exact thing. And sometimes it's been interesting, like sometimes it's just an anomaly in our data, again, where someone never, like they threw that away and they never updated the ERP system, right? Sometimes it's really that we actually had something that old. So I think we built this in 2 weeks, and they found a couple $100,000 in value, several M's in value, several T's in value, just in 2 weeks from a demo version, right, of just things they were able to throw away that they were paying for warehousing costs. Again, all the cards upgrades update when you select a batch, so you can see exactly how much you've been paying to warehouse that. So they paid $10,000 for this batch in this arbitrary made-up example. You can also see days until expiration. So we could look at the next 30 days, the next 90 days, whatever we want, and I can look at what is about to expire. So this is, again, where we're starting to say, instead of just dealing with the pain that the cost we've incurred and just minimizing that for the future, we can also prevent future cost. So in the next 90 days, here's 11 batches at plant number 16. And I can see exactly which batches those are at plant number 16, which materials they are, and again, go take action to sell that inventory, discount it, whatever I need to do so that it doesn't expire. And again, we have lots of other parameters. So, for example, we had someone that asked, they want to see that apparently they were pulling samples and they didn't have a business process on what to do with samples once they've tested them. So they had a ton of warehousing space tied up by old samples. So we test the quality or whatever of the sample. And so they were able to just look in their sample room and reduce many ooms in dollars. So the final one I'll show you today, and then I'll take some questions, inbound past due receipts. So this one's slightly more complicated, but again, I think the name is complicated more than the actual analysis. Inbound past due receipts is really just saying, did we receive what we bought when we thought we would? So the first thing I'm going to call out about this one is delivery date type. So in our ERP systems, there's actually several different fields for delivery date. And there's one that when we actually asked for it to be delivered, and there's one for when the vendor agreed it to be delivered, and not everyone agrees on how these are used. And we found some people actually like to update delivery date. So actually it was like one of our businesses that everyone knew had an issue with receiving goods, but they didn't show having an issue in the data. And so that's where, again, like I missed the contextual knowledge to know that this made no sense. But someone else was like, how are they so good? Like compared to me, they're not that good, there's no way. And what it turns out was, if the vendor contacted them and said they'd be late, they just go and update the delivery date to be the right one, and then they were never ever late. So, like, business process sometimes is also an outcome of these analytics, right? Often an outcome of these analytics. So at the top, again, I know it's a little hard to see, but we have the counts, right? How many purchase order items did you have? How many were delivered on time and how many were delivered late? What percentage of on time are you? And again, you can see that high-level business view, so you can compare your business to other businesses. We can then look at, and by the way, like vendor management uses this without ever picking a business because they're just curious at the global level, like how are our vendors doing and do we need to have a talk or something like that. So then we have the middle, which this is a fantastic example of context. So you have the bar, which is how many late deliveries you're receiving, and you have the line, which is your percentage of late deliveries. And sometimes you'll see the bar go down and the line go up. And like a common dashboarding mistake I see is that people will include one or the other. And without both, you have trouble really knowing how you're doing. And so for example, if the bar went down, maybe you just, but the line went up, maybe you had less deliveries that month. So of course, like you're gonna have less late deliveries as well if you have less overall deliveries. But if the line went up, then like you actually did, like you had more late deliveries. Then we built down below a Pareto chart, or some people call it a whale curve. So we have thousands of vendors. And again, back to actionable granularity, people say to me, like, I'm never gonna be able to evaluate every possible vendor, or every possible customer, every possible plant that we have to see where the problem is with our late deliveries. So we built this chart to say, really, who's causing the majority of your pain? So we have, some people call it 80-20 analysis, which I think is the title up there. If I mouse over this 80% line, and the zooming makes the tooltip show up funny, but about 2% of our vendors account for 80% of our past due receipts. So all of a sudden, instead of doing thousands of vendors, you really only need to deal with 2%, and you'll solve like the majority of your problem. So trying to build actionable granularity. So then here's that list of 80%. So you want to know who to contact? Here's your list of vendors. And I built in functionality too, so you could select a very specific vendor, and there's an option in the tooltip, if I can get it to show up here, that says email selected data. Now, so that no one spams my email while I'm presenting, I've turned off my email. But that button will actually import that data using a hyperlink URL action into email, and you could send it off to the plant manager, the customer relationship manager, and say, what's going on with this vendor, or what's going on with this customer, this plant. Then also, the bottom right chart, the final one on here, is really showing the percent of past due by time buckets. So what's interesting is I had a theory when I first looked at this that if you are between 0 and 5 days late, that's probably us receiving it late. So you delivered it on time, and we didn't put it in our ERP system on time. If it's between anything more than that, then it's probably it was actually late. Like, who would wait that long to receive it, right? That was my hypothesis. And I can click around a little bit and see if I can find an example. That's not great. Anonymized data for the win, or dummy data. Well, here's a good example. So 16 to 30 days has a jump. So why does 16 to 30 days have a jump? And what we actually found out was there's a process called three-way matching when you go to pay your bills. And if you don't receive the goods, you have a real big problem trying to do your three-way match to pay your bills. And so we actually found that likely 0 to 5 days actually was a late delivery, where 16 to 30 was we didn't receive it, and we didn't find out until we go and try and pay our bills that it wasn't in our ERP system and we couldn't process the payment. So that's another example of unexpected insights that we never intended to find, we never intended to analyze, but we discovered through looking at anomalies and exploring the data. And back to, I'll just hit on guided analytics one more time and that actionable granularity. Like, we just built a path here that kind of makes sense. So it's linear. You start at the top, you kind of go down until you get to something you can take action on. And that allowed us to, again, deal with a lot of different audiences with a very large and complex data sources. So that is what I have for you today. And I will take questions, but before I do, please make sure, I'd love some stars in the app or whatever. So if you go in and give me a thumbs up, tweet at me your comments, what you like, what you don't like. I'd love feedback as well. So what questions do you have? How much time do I have? Did I do pretty good? Oh, I have a ton of time left. Yes? Yeah. It's actually remarkably simple. We said, how valuable is this to you? So I'm like, the presentation title was leading with value. So we said, how valuable is this to you? And if it was more valuable than something else we were doing, we would change direction outside of the 2-week sprint. So we did sprint planning at the end of every 2-week sprint. And then we said, basically, what's the most valuable thing to tackle the next 2 weeks? Inside the 2 weeks, we didn't adjust. So we didn't adapt, we didn't change. But if someone came in, someone came in and said, if you can give me on time and full on a mobile dashboard, I'm going to save many ums in value, or save this many customer by showing them that we're great, right? Or make a new customer. And so we're like, oh, that's a lot of value. Like, yeah, let's go do that next week. And that's all we did. And if someone couldn't articulate to us the value, we definitely work with them and try to help them figure it out. But it always made us question, like, how serious are you? And really, is this worth our time if you can't tell me what it's worth? And not necessarily in dollar amounts. It didn't always have to be like, oh, we'll take the $10 million project over the $5 million project. It was just value.
Are you finding that your user base is a little more self-sufficient, or are they building their own dashboards with web editor?
Yeah, not yet. So they're definitely self-sufficient in consuming. They're getting there and starting to build new things. Web editing has largely been underutilized. So I think we're planning training courses to teach them how to web edit and ad hoc off the stuff. What we found is there's actually, so like in 6 months to produce 28 different pieces of analytics was unheard of. And they're just like shocked and just excited to drill through all the 28 that we have. So they haven't really been focusing a lot on answering new questions because they've just been focusing on trying to derive the value out of the questions we already answered. But I'm sure we'll get there. Yeah. Any others? Yes? Totally. Yeah, I think probably one is we didn't hire novices. So I think from at least a development perspective, they were pretty proficient already, so we weren't trying to teach them Tableau and teach them the analytics. And then two, a lot of the problems you have to solve when you're ramping up and operationalizing are data problems, data models. So we build it out of a spreadsheet, and they're going to build it out of a database. And so a lot of them were more data engineering and less actually of Tableau dashboarding. So a lot of times it's like, let's unplug the spreadsheet that we built the trial off of, and let's plug in the operational database. And so they they had a lot of questions about the data and how we got to, how we rebuilt the calculations was kind of a mess. But largely, again, like Tableau, all the calculations were built right in, right? So they could just look at the calculation. If they had questions, they'd ask us. But it wasn't a big problem. All of them, yeah. But like desktop is exclusively used for creating content, I think, at Cargill. We don't have anyone that uses desktop for just consuming. They only create content. But of this particular audience, like we built a product here. Like sometimes they don't even know it's Tableau. Like they think we built some custom software. And so they all use the server, like the web portal here, to consume the analytics. Yes? No, it's in Tableau. Yeah, I can escape. It's just, this is guest access enabled, so it's like the embedded version, but it's standard Tableau server.
Okay, so follow-up question to that. We're trying to build out an executive level dashboard, something that's simple and intuitive that doesn't require the drill in. Have you guys tackled that problem, and if so, how?
Yeah, not really. Specifically because what we find is that executive level dashboards are rarely actionable. So it's like they go and they say like, oh, my business is doing poorly, and then they like call a bunch of people below them, and then guess what? Those people need a way to like fix it. And so we kind of build the executive analytics, and like if you just want to look at the top little chart and say like, how is my business doing? If you got a problem, then give it to your plant manager, the same exact dashboard, and then they can go drill in. But the executive, like we've been asked for a lot of scorecards and a lot of one-pagers, and they want it printable, which drives me bonkers. Like, can't handle it. But like, yeah, we've been asked for a lot of that, and we do the same thing we do with every other piece of request, which is like, how much value does this add? And if they can't articulate the actions they'll take or the decisions they'll make, we'll say no to executives, just the same we'll say no to anyone else, which we were empowered to do. So again, that culture piece on being empowered to say no to somebody is critical, because it's not an easy thing. Yes? Yep, stop there, one at a time. So publishing content, I think almost all 600. We actually do checks on if you're not using your license, we'll take it away and give it to somebody else. So all of them are actually publishing content. Yeah, we have like hundreds of sites, I think, or at least. Totally. Yeah. So we use Alteryx. Yeah. Sorry, Dan. Our Alteryx guy's in the back. Yeah. We use Alteryx a lot. And then, yeah, I think that's mostly it. We use Alteryx and Tableau to derive these insights. And then when we operationalize it, like we've used our Cargill data platform, which is a Hadoop environment, and we have some stuff in SAP HANA. Yes. Yeah. So we use that for automation, and we're just starting to get, like we deployed it a few months back, so we haven't gotten into it too deeply yet, but he asked what other tools we're using to work with our data. Yeah. Yes.
I know this session is more about Tableau workflows, but are you or somebody able to discuss the Tableau architecture? We have a similar environment to what you have.
Yeah.
5,000 users, probably doubling in a year or so.
Yeah. David Walker. This guy right here. Come talk to him afterwards. Did you raise your hand, David? Yeah, wave. That guy. Yeah. He's the genius behind all of this. Yes. Yeah. So when we built this, so everything you see here was built by 4 people. So 50 different analytical outcomes, 28 of which were successful, and then we spent like months road showing it, and then everyone was like, "This is so amazing! Can I have it tomorrow?" And we're like, "Yeah, write me a check," and then they did, and then we expanded the team, and I think we're up to what, 11 or 12 now. So I got some other colleagues, Krish and Tom, right up front here, so they can also answer questions because they're still living this dream. I've moved on, but they're still living it. Yeah. Yeah. So I think I don't know, we call it product teams. So we don't do projects, we have a product team. So we handle customer service, we handle ETL, we handle the data acquisition modeling, we handle the dashboard design, we handle the presentations and the interaction with the customers. I mean, we handle everything from end to end. And that allows us to be really fast. Yeah. I think I saw another hand over here. No? Yeah.
How much of your time is spent coalescing data and trying to get it to the point where you can lay Tableau on top of it versus actually delivering the dashboard?
Yeah. It was like, so we did those 2-week sprints. Like week 1, 3 days, we're like, where's the data? And we'd like, Cargill doesn't have a data catalog. We'd like go interview people. And it was like, the better you are at relationships, the more successful you were at finding the data, which is scary, like because data people are notorious for being good relationship people. And then we spent 2 days in Alteryx typically, blending and modeling the data and getting it ready for Tableau once we found the thing. And then we'd spend a week in Tableau building out the story. Yeah, and then from there, like, if they gave it the thumbs up and we had to go operationalize it, then it's like 80% data work because the story was already valuable. They already proved that out. Then we just need to, again, plug it back in with the new updated, data pipeline. Yeah. Yes?
You mentioned a very interesting term, spreadsheet warriors.
Yeah.
How have you guys dealt with resistance to change, right? Trying to move people, like moving from static data to
Yeah.
actual insights.
Totally.
I'm sure there's been some risks and some resistance to change. How have you guys dealt with that? What successful strategies work to mitigate that risk?
I'm really glad you asked that. So we were super surprised. It was not the business that was resistant to change, it was IT. So we got a lot of like security people and governance people saying, wait, you're gonna give 12 different businesses data to all 12 different businesses? You're not gonna lock that down, you're not gonna restrict it? And we're like, yeah, it adds value to be able to compare against each other. And the businesses were like, this is fantastic. Like I can move faster than I could on my spreadsheets. I can see more data. I can interact with it in a way I've never dealt with before. I mean, the spreadsheet warriors were sitting there looking over millions of rows of data looking for anomalies, and we just gave them a tool to consume that in, I can't even say a fraction of the time, right? So they were actually like on board instantly. We had very little change management with our customers. Like they were all on board. Everything was IT. And that's actually what we find most of the time. If we do our job right and it really empower them to go drive the value, that's all they ever wanted in Excel anyway, was to like drive value at their pace for the questions they have. And as long as we can give that to them, without the typical IT problems of governance, which is definitely necessary, but without the cost associated with those problems, they're all on board. They have no problems. Yeah. Yeah, so the fun part about this is I've said we've identified many ums in value, and we've captured less ums in value, right? So the reason we're identifying more ums than we're capturing is because of that exact issue. So the people that are able to take action don't always take action. Sometimes the action you need to be taking isn't analytical action or data action, it's process, people, action. And so essentially that's why it's the beauty of our team is that we have those consultants sitting on the other half of the analytics that can go in and basically, again, they ask the same question I ask, which is how important is this to you? We said there's many ums of value here, like, do you want it or not? And if you want it, here's some recommendations I make to go get it. And if, otherwise, you're just going to leave it on the table. But guess what? Everyone knows you're leaving it on the table. So if you want to advertise that, then okay. But you're going to get some questions. Right? So that helped too, is by the transparency we created. Now people know when they're leaving value on the table, and they're a little more inclined to do something about it. Yeah, yeah. Yes? Yeah, no. We don't document what we built, and we don't document the value it provides. What we do is we ask for testimonials typically, and that was our best attempt at it for now. I think we hopefully want to get into like how does everyone use this, but right now we have enough support that we haven't been pressured too much to prove our worth. So as long as people are saying they're getting a lot of value out of it and they feel like it's worth paying for, we're pretty happy. But we do like testimonials so that when we go to new customers and say, you should consider adopting something like this, we can show them that, and mostly when we say testimonials, I really mean stories. Like the critical part is having stories, because that's what other people understand. Like you could look at a big number and think like, oh, I need to use this thing. But if you tell them like exactly like a real life example of how like we prevented this business from having expired inventory, which saved them X amount of money, and look how happy this person is with their job and their life now that they're not in a spreadsheet all day, then they get it and they want in. So that's why we focus on the stories and the testimonials more than like a spreadsheet full of documented value or something. But we do struggle with it. Yeah. I think we would have, if we didn't produce something after 6 months of heads down work, we definitely would have gotten some pressure. Like we can't go on forever failing, right? So we definitely had to produce, but because we found many ums of value compared to the ums that we spent, like largely no one cares about our budget. They just gave us the money we need to keep doing what we're doing because it's adding value. No, no. That's a privilege, right? We had to, I don't know who set up our team, 2 years ago when they made the pitch saying, like, we need to be fully funded in order to find stuff like this. So whoever did that, like, props to them, because that's like a rare thing you see from teams is getting like full privilege to go take risk like that. But that's what allowed us to accomplish this. So definitely that's a cultural challenge that many parts of our organization still face, is the ability to innovate, right? That would like take those risks, certainly. Yes? I wouldn't say process. We have some best practices. So like within our team, we share with each other before we publish out. I think within the community, we have many different sites, I think 70 some sites. And so site admins are in charge of what's being published on their sites. That's the data integrity and quality, that's the performance. And then David does a great job at monitoring the environment too, to make sure no one's gonna take down the system for everyone else. But aside from that, it's mostly the site admins that help manage their own community. So we crowdsource all that, because we're now on the team that managed Tableau, so I'm on the other side of the fence now. Like we're just a couple guys too, trying to support 15,000 self-service analytics users between Alteryx, Tableau, So like we're trying to support a massive community. We gotta crowdsource, we gotta help each other. So no defined process, best practices. Yes? Yeah, we have a ton of scheduled extracts, scheduled refreshes. Yeah. No, they just need to type it in. So it defaults to whatever you set it at, and then they can either pick from a drop-down that we set. So largely, like, for example, we use parameters sometimes for business to help. Before they had, it was actually before they had, like, what, cross-database joins. We had to use a parameter to help filter across data sets. And so, like, those would be pretty static. And so if we added a new business within Cargill, which isn't a common occurrence, but sometimes a business will come and go, we had to update the parameter. But otherwise, like, the square footage, the price per square foot just defaults at the, like, industry average or something, and then they just update it. And then we say, like, if that's something valuable to you to have it update based on the plant or location you're at, like, then you need to put the data somewhere that we can get at it and not Bob's spreadsheet. Okay. Yeah. Any others? Well, thank you, everyone.